Hello guys, and welcome to today's video. And in today's video I am playing a special psychic list against a crazy code colorless list featuring the new Hops cards. Now of course I know this matchup is kind of scary. I've already played against Hops stuff a couple times and it's really scary when it gets going fast. So my game plan here is to go fast, put on a ton of pressure, and try to outbox my opponent. Of course, getting Togekiss up to take additional prizes is the best way to ensure this, but that is not exactly what happens in this game. I am going first, so I draw for turn, and I have Inkay, so I bench him, and I also have Mysterious Treasure, which I use sacking psychic energy in order to go get my board set up. Cleffa was something I heavily considered here, but I don't have an easy way to switch, so I ultimately end up going for the Ralts, because the Ralts line with Curly and Glade is the best setup support for the psychic list, and the earlier you get that going, the better for the psychic list. Now here, my opponent can attack with Snorlax turn 1 if he gets Amina and DCE, and that would be absolutely terrifying. And he also tops decked the Artisan, which lets him go get his Fan Rotom, which he can use to set up his draw support engine, as well as that Porygon Z, which is instrumental to chaining attacks in his list. There has been talk about banning double colorless and twin energy, and honestly I potentially seeing Hops Choice Band also being banned, but this crazy code list with the Hop stuff is probably the best way to make sure you can attack back to back, as we'll see in this game. My opponent uses Fan Rotom, gets out the Bidoof, Porygon, and Squavit, and my opponent plays Quick Ball, sacking the Raihan, and also elects to go get another guy out. Here it could be a Oranguru or realistically another attacker, and it's going to be the Oranguru. Now my opponent can see additional 3 to 4 cards this turn with the Squavit Oranguru combo, and I am sitting over here feeling a little scared. My opponent uses Sinlin, sacking via Seeker, grabbing back the Raihan, and attaches DCE to his Snorlax and passes. Luckily, he does not get the turn 1 attack off. Now here I top deck Guzma and Hala, and to be completely honest, it sent me down a dark path that I probably should have not treaded. I use Artisan to go search through my deck, and I consider Cleffa for a little bit, but I grab Latios instead because I am going full greed. And here I use my manual attachment for turn to attach to the Latios because I need an attachment and a Malamar acceleration this turn for this attack to work out. So unfortunately I can't use Mystery Energy this turn to retreat the non-Krozma, so I do have to go for the Floatstone to get the retreat. But with the Evo Incense in hand, I am able to go get Malamar into the Latios and swing for a KO on the Snorlax. Realistically here, a more passive play and probably the better play is to just go get Cleffa, free retreat into the Cleffa, and set up my hand, because I do need to get the Togekiss up sooner rather than later, but I decided to be greedy to see if I would get punished for this greed, and I don't exactly get punished, but I decide to go for it anyways. My opponent does have Fan Rotom, which he can respond with because there is a stadium in play, but unless he gets another pop-off turn, the likelihood of him getting a second attacker off next turn is pretty low. And that is a Luster Purge, sacking all energy from Latios, and the first prize card of the game. And as expected, here comes up the Fan Rotom. My opponent plays an Ultra Ball, sacking Raihan and Buddy Poffin. With this, he can go get the P2 or PZ or Bibarel, and he goes immediately for the PZ, telling me he has Rare Candy in hand, and there is Rare Candy PZ. So if he does find a switch option like Jet Energy or Recycle Energy, he can easily pull out a Hop Snorlax this turn and take the KO on my Latios and put a ton of pressure on his board. So my opponent plays Mina this turn. The Mina will mean if he finds that attacker, he can manual retreat this turn. But let us see what he does end up getting off of his Squavit Oranguru. Now his hand is empty, so he has to Orangaroo first, and he does find capture and therapeutic energy, but no attacker to attach them to. My opponent decides to crazy code the capture energy into play though, to guarantee his Pokemon out on turn, and that will be a Hop Snorlax. He is considering Hop's Cramorant because by the time the attacker is up and ready, I will probably have 4 prizes, but I could easily play around or guess up that Cramorant if he does go for it, so my opponent decides to go for the Hop Snorlax instead. And with a Crazy Code in hand, he can therapeutic energy, and that is a Squava, putting the Crisis Punch safely on the bottom of the deck, and he gets recycle energy to hand. Now he can just power up the Snorlax, or he could have saved it for a free retreat, but he decides to put it on the Snorlax, so he's only 1 energy away from attacking, and uses Assault Landing to do 70 damage to my Latios. Now I top deck an Evo Soda and use it immediately to go get Kirlia, and my hand is kinda sucky at the moment. I have my last 2 special energy in hand, the counter and the mystery energy. And if I wanted to retreat Latios this turn, I have to attach mystery energy, but I also severely need it for my Tinkaton and Necrozma, so I am in a bit of a sticky situation. I do also have Malamar available to me for the 1 basic energy and discard to put on Necrozma if I so wanted, but here I decide to sack the counter energy. Even though it hurts me, the mobility that the mystery energy gives me is way too important, so I decide to keep it on hand. And off of the Kirlia, I get 2 additional cards, that being Gallade and Level Ball. Now Level Ball here could get me Cleffa if I wanted more to set up, and honestly was probably the better play here, but I wanted to keep the momentum going, so I go for the Tinkatink because the Tinkaton is also a draw line as well as a really good attacker. I decide to attach mystery energy to Tinkatink for turn because I feel like the Tinkatink attacking for 1 energy doing way more damage is more valuable, but I do decide to put the psychic energy on the Necrozma, so the barrier attack is an option for me. And I use Glide for free with the Dimension Valley to put 20 damage on the Fan Rotom. Now my opponent starts his turn off immediately with a Squav, and off of Squav's finds Double Turbo, which he attaches to Hop Snorlax. Now that damage reduction will become important later, and then he uses a Orangaroo to draw 3 cards. Now here, his Fan Rotom is taking the KO on the Latios, which means he doesn't have to put his Snorlax up into active, and he plays a Winona to go get just a Barrel because he wants his hand free to draw additional cards with those Industrious Incisors. My opponent barrels for 2 cards, finding Trainer's Mail off of it, and he immediately plays that Trainer's Mail, finding a couple options. Here he could go for Birdkeeper for the ease of movement and draw, or Hisuian Heavy Ball if he needs something to sack, or if he thinks there's something on prizes he wants to get. And he goes for the Hisuian Heavy Ball here, shuffling back his deck and reordering all those cards he put on the bottom. And that is going to be an Assault Landing for the KO on my Latios, giving him the first prize of the game. Now I go into my Tinkatink, it has free retreat thanks to that mystery energy, and evolve immediately into Gallade. I play Palpat immediately as well before I even go into the deck, putting back Lusamine and Raihan. Goosala was an accidental put there. And with the Gallade, I can grab Raihan or Teammates, and here I am thinking Teammates might be the best option. It's kind of tricky to find the routing this turn because no matter who I attack with, Snorlax will just come in and clean up. And to be completely honest, I don't want to give my opponent a free Necrozma kill because that guy is my only main attacker at this point in time. And the same reasoning why I just don't want to go Rare Candy Tinkatink either. My hand is empty, so I don't even get to use the gather materials if I bring it into play. So I ponder about this for a very long time. Iron Boulder is an also useless Pokemon right now, and I have no more psychic energy in discard. So I ponder and think and contemplate, and eventually come upon this really weird play. It might not be the best play, but it was the play I came up with. I decide to go for Field Blower Muscle Band. Now, it kind of sucks using Field Blower this early to get rid of my own Floatstone on Necrozma, but with Field Blower Muscle Band, I'm able to do 50 damage with my barrier attack, and because of the double turbo on Hop Snorlax, I am cleanly living a Hop Snorlax dynamic press because it will only be doing 120 damage. Normally it does 170 damage, but because of the double turbo energy reducing that to 150 and the barrier attack reducing that further by 30, I would live the Hop Snorlax attack, making him have to go a completely different route if he wants to attack and KO my Necrozma, meaning that recycle energy resource and other special energies are stuck on that Snorlax for a little longer. Of course, that might not be the best play, but it was the most aggressive play I saw to do that turn in order to stay boxing in this game. Of course, I really do want to get that Togekiss up as well to ensure I can get some double prizes at some point, but the opportunity just hasn't presented itself. And that is a KO on the Rotom for 50 damage with 30 damage reduction, giving me a little bit more time to set up my board if my opponent doesn't respond immediately. Now this puts my opponent in a tricky spot. He can't just swing with Snorlax, so he promotes the Bibarel and uses Floatstone on the Bibarel to give him free retreat. Now here my opponent has Cyphermunic, but he also has Gulab's Hala, which he could use to try to bump my stadium, but he has already burned Artazon. So he uses Cyphermania to rig his top deck with 2 cards which he can draw into this turn using the Squavit Oranguru Bibarel engine. And he wants Rescue Stretcher on the top there. He's revealing it because he's going to play it anyways to get that Snorlax back because he's the best response at this point in time, as well as 1 mystery card that he is obviously going to play at some point as well. Now my opponent does play Hisuian Heavy Ball and finds that Minccino off of his prizes, which gives him another attacker in the future to use against my board. My opponent plays the TM Evo just to burn it so he can draw more cards, uses Bibarel to draw 1, which is going to be the Rescue Stretcher, which he uses to grab Snorlax, which he attaches Twin Energy to, and then he plays Squavit, grabbing that 1 last card, which is going to be the Fairy Energy, which is manual attachment for turn. My opponent also draws 3 cards, finds the town map, which he reveals all those lovely cards like that Hop's Choice Band being prized, as well as Parallel City. Now here, I am kind of worried about that Parallel City. He's going to obviously want to take it off of prizes to bump my Dew Valley as soon as possible so I can stop getting value off of that. And then he uses something Snore, discarding the TM Evo for turn and taking the KO on my Necrozma. Now my opponent here takes the Night Stretcher off of prizes so he can recycle attackers a little bit easier and get Fairy Energy back as well, and I promote Tinkatink because of the free retreat, and luckily for me, Snorlax stays asleep. Now I immediately use a Gallade. Here I have a couple options. I can always go for Raihan here to power up an attacker, or I could go for some kind of setup move, and ultimately I decide to grab and put Raihan into my hand. I don't think I decide to use it this turn, but having it for future turns is pretty valuable, especially if he uses Hex somehow to turn off my Gallade, or if I have to use Gallade and lose him in the future. And I play VS Seeker this turn though to use teammates, because getting 2 cards out of my deck here is more valuable than energy at this point, and I am finally going for that rare candy Tinkatink play this turn. I have cards in hand now, so I actually can use Gathering Materials to draw 3 cards during this turn. And that is exactly what I do, sacking Hisuian Heavy Ball to draw 3 cards, and I find Togepi off of those, which I bench immediately so I can potentially get a future Togekiss slow roll up to hopefully close out the game. And now I play Trainer's Mail, I find Iono and Artazon, and I decide to go for the Artazon because I'm expecting my opponent to get the Parallel City pretty soon, and I'll need something to bump that Parallel City, and Artazon gives me a little more room on my bench to work with in the late game. And then I use the Malamar. I held it before because I was going to wait to see if I got a potential another attacker out. And I Malamar to Gallade, and then I use Special Hammer to take a KO on the Snorlax, taking another prize. My opponent promotes the free retreat Bibarel and draws return. It is a Bunnelby, which with Bunnelby and Crisis Punch still in his deck, he can use to easily close up the game as soon as I get to one prize. But right now, he has to decide if he's going to swing with Hops Snorlax or not. My opponent dodges off his turn by playing Night Searcher, getting back that regular Snorlax as a second option for an attacker, and then squabs his hand away. With Squab, he gets one card, and then he Orangaroos for 2 more. And my opponent plays the Pokegear and finds both Birdkeeper and Arven, but he also has Tackle in hand, and he has Goose Hollow in Dex, and he is debating about playing that Goose Hollow this turn. So with that knowledge in mind, he grabs Arven and puts it to hand and uses Tackle to get that Goose Hollow out. His Sinnoh was sacked early in game, so that is not an option for him. And he plays the Goose Hollow, sacking both Hex Maniac and Arven from hand, which is nice for me to see because Hex Maniac would have been really annoying to play against. And this gives him a special energy and a tool and stadium, though I can see exactly where his last stadium is, and I think he is out of tools as well. So my opponent just grabs the counter energy, which is going to go onto that Snorlax, and his hand is empty, so that will also be a Bibarel for a fresh set of 5 cards. Now all he needs here is a single energy to attack with his Snorlax, and luckily for him, he does find Jet Energy, which means he could very well Jet Energy this turn if he wanted to attack with the Thumping Snorlax. But instead, he decides to go into Hops Snorlax, saving the Jet Energy and other Snorlax for a later date. 180 damage is slightly better than 170, and he takes the KO on my Tinkatink, doing a whopping 80 self-damage. Now he has to draw his prize card before I promote, though Gallade is probably my only good option of promoting at this point in time, and he grabs Parallel as I suspected he would. I draw for turn and I find an N. Now here I still have Dimension Valley in play, so I can attack for 1 energy, and I'm like, I'm gonna play Raihan, except Raihan does not activate because I only have seen 1 basic Psychic Energy this entire game, and it is currently on my Gallade. So I go into my deck and I'm like, am I really gonna play a Colress's Tenacity for 1 Psychic Energy? And the answer is yes. I don't have any other supporters in deck that can get out a basic Psychic Energy for me to attack with. So I play Colress's Tenacity, I get the basic Psychic Energy out, and here I hope to find another way to get another basic out, like a Boulder here to put the Psychic Energy on from Gallade's attack would be really nice, but unfortunately I think I don't have that option unless I bunt the Dimension Valley myself to play Artisan. So I attach energy to Gallade. I already played Supporter for turn, and that is a Swirling Slice for the KO, moving the energy onto Togepi so I can pay for retreat next turn. My opponent promotes the Bibarel and places down his Bunnelby. At this point, all I need to do is take 1 more prize, and his Bunnelby with Crisis Punch will be able to clean up gain. My opponent attaches Recycle Energy to Snorlax and plays a Parallel City at last, getting rid of that D-Valley that stuck around for too long. My opponent plays the Squavit, putting his hand on the bottom and drawing 1 card. And it's nothing super crazy, so he uses Orangaroo to draw 2 more. Finding nothing super crazy, he Bibarels for 2 more cards, and off of that he finds Birdkeeper, which he plays to switch in the Snorlax and draw 3 cards. Now here, my opponent is just trying to set up his hand as best as he can in order to make sure his Bibarel can attack and get the Crisis Punch next turn. So he uses Oregon's Crazy Code to attach a DCE to the Bunnelby. And he does have Crisis Punch in hand, which he can wait on, and as long as I don't disrupt his hand, it will be in his hand. My opponent takes the KO, grabs the Fairy Energy off the prizes, and gets double heads off the Snorlax, which is really terrifying, because I earnestly hoped he would stay asleep for at least 2 more turns, so I could have a little bit more time to set up, but unfortunately that is not what happened. Now here I can play Artisan, and unfortunately my opponent's hand size is just so big I can't really afford to do Boulder this turn. I could play N, but I also need Raihan this turn to power up the Boulder because I lost the Dimension Valley. And I also lost my Buddy Catch, so I can't just go for Dimension Valley this turn either. So I'm looking at my options. I also have Wob available to me, or I could just buy a turn for Temple with Cleffa and try to set up my hand, but my hand is already pretty large and has lots of resources. I ultimately decide to go for the Boulder because the Boulder, if I do get a way to match hand size, is a little bit better at putting on some pressure. I do bench the Wob and I use Malamar to pet energy on Iron Boulder. I retreat with Togepi first and then play the Guzma, gusting up my opponent's PZ, which probably doesn't matter too much, but I go into Wob, shutting off my opponent's abilities for the turn and pass. My opponent manual attaches a Fairy Energy to his Snorlax and uses his own Guzma to gust up the Togepi. Togepi was my only option this game to potentially take 2 prizes, my way to skip the Bunnelby Crisis Punch turn activation. Now here my opponent considers putting Powerful Energy on the Bunnelby, but decides instead just to take the KO with Snorlax and grabs Hop's Choice Band as his last prize. I promote the Iron Boulder. He does not wake up, luckily for me. I think about playing the Raihan, but I don't finish the action. Because my opponent's hand side is still 7, I do not match his hand side. I need to find a way to match my opponent's hand size and still be able to play a single card from my hand. So I play Marnie. Marnie will give me 5 cards, and as long as one of those cards is a Psychic Energy, I can play it from my hand and take the KO while matching my opponent's hand size. So unfortunately for me, I did not have this play available for me last turn because I did not have Gallade. And luckily for me, I find that Psychic Energy. I also find Fog Crystal, which would have also been an out to Psychic Energy. And luckily for me too, I also disrupted my opponent's hand, which had the Crisis Punch in it. And before attacking, I use Malamar to put a Psychic Energy on the Wobbuffet with a matching hand size of 4 against 4. My Iron Boulder is able to take the KO, knocking out my opponent's Snorlax. And my opponent promotes his Bibarel, and he needs to find his way to get Crisis Punch this turn. Recycle Energy came back to his hand, so he does have a fully powered up Bumblebee, but he decides to play Jet Energy instead, firmly putting the Bumblebee in the active, and he debates about where exactly to put the Recycle Energy in case he had a way to get a backup attacker up and going. But he needs to look at his resources right now to see exactly how many cards he had available to him. He uses Artisan to put Minccino out and thin his deck a little bit, but he realizes he doesn't quite have enough energy in deck to attack with anything except Bunnelby this game to take the KO, so he goes ahead and puts Recycle Energy on the Bunnelby. He plays the Field Blower to thin his hand a little and his deck, and uses Squawk to put those cards on the bottom of his deck. Now his deck is pretty thin, so chances of him finding the Crisis Punch is pretty high. My opponent finds Nest Ball, he can't play it. Draws 2 more cards, and that is the Crisis Punch, and that is the game. Now, I chose a very aggressive route in this matchup, and because of that, I was able to keep pace, but boxing evenly with normal is not the best way to play against normal. I really needed that Togepi up and Togekiss up to try to get a cheeky couple of prizes and put on pressure on my opponent, but it just never ended up happening. And I'll see you guys all in next week's video, which will be a Hydro Pump deck list breakdown, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Until next time, bye!